Welcome to Aikitalks. Real stories, real practice, real Aiki. This is episode 2 of our beginner series, and today we're looking at one of the most important and most misunderstood parts of Aikido training, and that is a ukemi, the art of falling safely. If you're a beginner, ukemi may feel intimidating at first, but it's actually the key that unlocks the whole world of Aikido. So, what does ukemi really mean? Ukemi is often translated as receiving body or receiving technique, but beginners sometimes mistake it as being thrown. Ukemi is much more than that. It is learning to protect yourself, learning to move with an attack, learning to let go of stiffness, and learning to respond instead of resist. Ukemi teaches adaptability, a key element of Aikido. And this is something I have learned throughout my time in doing Aikido, is that when receiving ukemi, you don't resist. Now, there is an element of resisting. There is a bit about making a technique bite, and I think that's important too. But learning to go with the flow, as it were, a little, to make sure that we train in a safe way. So let's think back to that quote from last episode that O-sensei said, "Life is growth. If we stop growing, technically and spiritually, we are all as good as dead." Now, again, a bit morbid at the end. However, ukemi is that growth. Every roll, every fall, every recovery is a moment of learning. And I think that's really important for us to remember, is that when we receive ukemi, we are learning something. And if you remember back to last episode, I discussed how important it was to be yuki and nagi and develop your aikido through both of those practices. And receiving ukemi allows you to understand something about that technique. Now I want to look at why ukemi comes before technique. And this is something that I learned when I was younger. I learned how to roll before I ever did a technique. And sometimes you would have lessons like that where you did a lot of practicing. I remember doing it quite often as a beginner. And when I helped teach beginners in my early Aikido career, where we did a lot of ukemi practice before they actually did a technique. Now that's important. Beginners often want to jump straight into locks and throws. But Aikido teaches ukemi first for a reason. It keeps you safe. And I think that's important as a beginner, that you realize that you need to be safe because we want you to come back, and that is how you develop your Aikido. So what does that mean for beginners? It means that doing your ukemi, you're going to learn things like confidence. You're going to trust your partner. You're going to have spatial awareness, and you're going to have calmness under pressure. So without ukemi, technique becomes dangerous. But with the ukemi, they become effortless. And it's not a technique that you roll out of it. Now, don't get me wrong, some people do roll out of techniques. And that could be for major reasons of things. And I think that's something we'll discuss further along in this series, or maybe on another series. But you must learn how to do a ukemi so you can protect yourself, so the technique isn't 100% realistic. Because if you do a realistic martial Aikido technique, it is devastating, and they are designed that way. And ukemi is there to allow us to continue our practice. So having that mindset that we aren't just dancing on the mat, despite the fact we may look like it, certainly those of us who like moving quickly, you're learning how to receive a technique and not injure yourself. So how do you overcome that fear of falling? Now, none of us like falling over. It is something that's quite jarring sometimes, and learning how to fall safely is important. So many new students are afraid of falling, and that is completely natural. It's an unusual thing to do. So ukemi gradually teaches you to breathe into the movement, land without impact, stay relaxed while moving, absorb force through rolling, and keep your awareness even while upside down. And actually, that's a really important thing. The breathe into the movement. We all have certainly, like, we all like movement in our technique, and that develops over time again. But not to hold your breath. That's really important when receiving ukemi. Don't hold your breath. When you land, you are going to land, and there is going to be some impact, but learning a proper ukemi, a proper roll, will help you to soften that blow, soften that impact. Now, you do have some lands that are quite harsh and impactful on the body, and that is something that you learn over time, but you learn how to do them with minimal impact. And I think that's the important thing. They sound and look impressive because they are designed to sound and look impressive. To stay relaxed while moving. Now, this is important. Being able to roll, but still do a roll, but be relaxed. And if you remember, I have already said, relaxation is not about, no powering your muscles. It is relax the tension, and stiffness is what hurts when you roll, whether that is from nerves or age. It happens, but there's a reason why young children don't hurt themselves so much when they fall over, is because they're in a state of relaxation rather than a state of tension, which is what happens with us at an older age. Absorbing the force through rolling. If you don't roll, the technique is forceful. If you do roll, you transfer that force into your momentum for that roll, and I think that's a good way of looking at it. And it's about keeping your awareness even while upside down, being able to know what's happening around you, because it's not just about you and your nagi as Yuki, it's about you, Nagi, and the other Yuki and Nagi who are on the mat, and learning how to roll properly, and shortening your roll or lengthening your roll will help save other people on the mat. Now, I come back to that quote from O-sensei, a good stance and posture reflect a proper state of mind, and a frightened mind might make the body rigid, and we know it does often. A calm mind allows the body to move safely. So that's why your first lesson focuses on soft control movements rather than big throws. So it's about getting that right mindset, and I think that's something that we all know is important. So what is the role of a Yuki? Now, I've mentioned Yuki and Ukemi quite often. It's more than just the one who falls. Beginners often misunderstand the role of Yuki. Yuki is not the victim in Aikido. Yuki is the one who initiates the attack, the one who learns to connect with Nagi, the one who develops adaptability, the one who learns to fall, roll, recover and rise, and the one who builds sensitivity to movement. And really, when you think about all those things, that's a big part of Aikido. In many ways, Yuki improves faster than Nagi, because Yuki is always moving, always learning, and always adapting. And I think that's important. We are the one who learns how to connect with Nagi, and we get this rhythm. Now, that can be a hindrance and it can be a benefit. So we'll talk about that again in another episode. We are the one who initiates the attack. Aikido doesn't initiate attack. We may goad people into doing an attack with certain movements and certain positions and stature and stances and so on, but Yuki is the person who does that attack. We developed our adaptability. We also help develop Nagi, because yes, we receive Ukemi, but we also, when we develop ourselves as a Yuki, we test Nagi, and we provide a little bit more resistance each time as we're going through the grades to test our actual technique. Not resist straight away. It's a gradual thing, and I think that's important to remember as well. And once again, Ukemi is a basic, it's a fundamental of all Aikido, and we talked about that Shioda sensei quote about you have to master the very basics solidly, and I think that's important. The foundation of which all higher movements is built is the Ukemi, and I think that's something we should all try and develop in our Aikido. So, relaxation and Ukemi. Now, how can you roll and be relaxed? And like we said, relaxation has nothing to do with falling over. Relaxation is about relaxing the tension. And this comes into our concept of Shin, the mind, and Tai, the body, where we use that in Shingi Tai. It's what fundamental part of our name. So ukemi is a physical expression of two elements of that, of Shingi Tai. Like I said, the Shin and the Tai. When the mind is tense, the body stiffens and falls become unsafe. When the mind is calm, movements flow. Ukemi builds flexibility, strength, connection, balance, and whole body unity. And I think that's a really important thing to remember when you are doing ukemi. So Osensei has this quote, which is, "Life itself is always a trial. In training, you must test and polish yourself." Now, when I think about that, I think about ukemi as a physical polishing of body and spirit. You know, preparing your body and preparing your spirit to allow yourself that mindfulness to receive the technique in relaxation and to develop that training, because with a ukemi, the training does flow. But I think that's a really important bit about developing your testing of Nagi. And I think that's our element. That's an important bit of Yuki's training, is that, you know, the technique works and we take a roll. And then when Nagi, when we're all getting a bit higher grade, we resist a little testing to make sure the technique is still working, developing those tests for fundamentals, positioning, taking someone off balance, movement, relaxation. These are all things that we are testing each other on, and it is Yuki's responsibility to help Nagi develop those, and it is Nagi's responsibility to help Yuki develop theirs through ukemi. So I think that's really important. Now, one of the other things that I think is really important about ukemi is that you should be learning to blend. It's not about resisting straight away. Beginners will often try and resist a throw, and that's out of instinct. This is natural. The body wants to stay upright. But Aikido teaches something different, to move with the force, not against it. Now, I think that's important about protecting yourself as the Yuki, taking the role so you don't hurt yourself. Now, as I said, we do build up our resistance over time. We do resist technique a little bit more as we're going through technique and we're mastering it. And that isn't oh, I can stop you doing this. This is I can make it slightly more difficult for you to perform the technique, so the technique is developed to work more efficiently. So I think that's important. You know, ukemi will train you in these principles about yielding instead of clashing, accepting instead of resisting, turning instead of blocking, and blending instead of colliding. And I think that's important because we are an art that learns to blend technique, and we are there to harmonize with Nagi, not to clash against them. And as Nagi, we're there to harmonize with the attacker. So I think that's important. And ukemi is the first experience of Aiki, that harmony in motion, and therefore it is a fundamental. So you might be thinking, how does ukemi improve your Aikido? Well, taking a fall teaches you balance, timing, connection, awareness, body alignment, safe movement, and sensitivity. And these skills directly improve your ability to perform technique later on. Senior practitioners can often tell how advanced someone is simply by watching their ukemi, not their throws. And that's certainly something we've all seen, is that we know this person understands Aiki principle by the way that they yuki. And I'm not saying that it's the only way that you develop, that you can see how advanced someone is, or even how they are advancing I think is more important. But you can see that they understand the principles. So ukemi is not only defensive, it also teaches you how to attack safely, honestly, and with good intent. And I think that's important. It's with good intent is what we are looking for there. And attacking honestly, not there to be difficult, but there to help improve. So, what does all this mean? I've talked a lot about concepts that may be new to you, but again, may be well known to you. And that's the problem of listening to someone who's done Aikido for a long time. They can talk about the basics and they can go on and on and on, which is a little bit what this is all about. But I'm putting this down onto, well, I'm going to say onto paper again, but I'm going to put this out there so it can help my students when I hopefully have a club of my own. So, where does the beginner's path go from there? So new students should always aim to practice rolling slowly, focus on posture, keep breathing, avoid stiffening, relax the shoulders, move as one unit, accept that progress takes time. The most important thing for people who start Aikido to do is know that you can ask for help. Ukemi is something every Aikido student struggles with at first. Even high-ranking instructors once fell awkwardly. They rolled incorrectly, and they felt scared of the roll. Growth is part of that journey. And remember O-sensei's words, failure is the key to success. Each mistake teaches us something. You will improve simply by showing up and practicing. So thank you for listening to today's post on ukemi. And ukemi might seem daunting in the beginning, but it is the gateway to confidence, safety, and real Aikido movement. Now, we're probably going to explore something that Soke Jones talks about, and it's a fundamental of our style in Shingitai, and that is relax completely. But until then, if you could like and subscribe and share this with your Aikido community, I'd be much appreciative. Thank you for joining me for Aikitalks. Until next time, stay centered, keep training, and take care.